Think about the last time you said something embarrassing in front of people you really wanted to impress. Your face got hot, your cheeks turned red, and no matter how hard you tried to stop it, you couldn't. You can hold back tears, you can fake a smile, you can keep your voice steady while you're panicking inside, but you can't stop a blush once it starts. That should bother you more than it does. Every other social signal we have, we can control to some degree. We lie with our words constantly. We fake confidence, fake calm, fake happiness at parties we don't want to be at. But there's one signal that evolution built into us that we simply can't fake, can't suppress, and can't hide. And it does the opposite of what a survival trait should do. It broadcasts your weakest moment right when you most want to hide it. Charles Darwin became obsessed with this exact question. In his 1872 book on the expression and emotions, he called blushing the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. He spent years searching for an equivalent in animals. He couldn't find one. Plenty of animals change color under stress. Octopi flush, lizards shift hue, some birds show skin color changes during mating displays, but none of it matches what humans do. No other species has a reflex that activates specifically during social judgment, the moment you believe someone else is evaluating you. Here's how specific the mechanism actually is. Blushing isn't just your face getting warm. It's the sympathetic nervous system flooding the blood vessels in your cheeks, ears, neck, and upper chest, and nowhere else with extra blood flow. Triggered by something happening entirely inside your head. Not a temperature change, not exercise. A thought. Specifically the thought that you are being seen and judged right now. Your body treats being watched as a physical event, one worth a physical response. So if this is purely a thought, not a temperature change or a chemical exposure, where does this wiring actually come from? And why does a trait this specific only show up in us? There's a reason the reaction stays locked to those specific areas, instead of spreading through your whole body. Psychologist Peter Drummond spent decades running lab experiments on facial blood flow at Murdoch University. His research found that the blood vessels in your cheeks and ears carry a different mix of receptors than the vessels in the rest of your skin. Adrenaline normally tightens blood vessels everywhere, making you pale. But in the face, that same adrenaline surge triggers the opposite response. Those vessels widen instead of narrowing. Drummond measured this directly with blood flow sensors, not just by asking people how they felt. Your face is running on the one vascular system in your body, built to turn redder under stress instead of paler. Now here's the detail that should really stop you. Darwin didn't just write about blushing in general. He went looking for a very specific edge case. He wrote to doctors and teachers, asking them directly whether blind people blush. The answer came back yes. He documented Laura Bridgman, a woman who was blind and deaf since infancy, who had never once seen a human face, and yet she blushed anyway in the exact same situations that sighted people do. Out of 7 or 8 blind children in one asylum, 3 were described as frequent blushers. People who had never seen the expression performed it perfectly anyway. That rules out the obvious explanation. This isn't something we learn by copying other people's faces. Psychologist Ray Crozier, whose modern academic account of blushing research treats Darwin's case studies as central evidence, points to this blind blusher data as the strongest proof that the reflex is wired in before we ever open our eyes. So if it's not learned and animals don't have it, where did this come from? Why would a trait that exposes your internal state to rivals ever get selected for instead of against? In 2009, Dutch researchers Corine Dijk and Peter Jong ran an experiment that points toward an answer. They showed participants footage of people making an embarrassing mistake. Some of the actors blushed visibly afterward, some kept a neutral face. Across the board, participants rated the blushing person as more trustworthy, more likable, and easier to forgive for the exact same mistake. That lines up with an idea biologist Amotz Zahavi proposed in 1975, now known as the handicap principle. Some signals are valuable precisely because they're expensive or impossible to fake. A peacock's tail is costly to grow, so it proves the bird is healthy enough to afford it. A blush is involuntary and impossible to switch on by choice, so it proves something too. It proves you actually feel bad about what happened. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry," but nobody can say it and also fake the blood rushing to their face on command. In small ancient human groups where your survival depended on being trusted by those around you, that unfakeable apology might have really mattered. It could be the difference between being forgiven or being cast out. And in a small hunter-gatherer band, being cast out could mean dying alone. That raises an obvious question. If blushing is this useful, why don't our closest relatives have it too? Primatologist Franz de Waal, who spent decades studying emotion in apes, put it bluntly. Humans, he wrote, may be the only animal that blushes, or needs to. He searched for an equivalent across his entire career and never found one. And that gap isn't because primates are blind to red signals. A 2006 study on primate color vision found that older monkeys and Luray apes evolved sharp red-green vision specifically to read skin tone changes, signals tied to health, status, and mating readiness. The eyesight needed to catch a blush was already there, fully evolved, but what never showed up in them was the blush itself. There's clinical evidence that hints at how deep this reflex runs. Some people blush so often and so intensely that it becomes disabling, and a number of them choose a surgery called endoscopic thoracic sympathectomy, which permanently cuts the nerve pathway behind the reflex. It works. Reported success rates for stopping facial blushing run as high as 70 to 90%. But cutting that one pathway doesn't just turn off blushing. In the majority of patients, sweat regulation that used to happen elsewhere in the body reroutes, and compensatory sweating shows up on the chest, back, or thighs. Severe enough in some studies that over a third of patients have to change clothes during the day. You can sever the wire. The system finds somewhere else to discharge. So that settles it, right? Blushing is an honest, costly signal evolved to repair trust after a social mistake, found only in humans because only humans live in groups complex enough to need it. Except there's a piece of this that still doesn't fully add up. In 2024, a research team led by Malika Nikolic at the University of Amsterdam put this to the test directly. They had participants watch recordings of themselves singing karaoke while lying in an MRI scanner, and measured the actual temperature change in their cheeks. People blushed more watching themselves than when watching someone else sing the exact same song just as badly. But the brain activity behind it wasn't centered in the regions you'd expect for consciously worrying about judgment. It showed up most strongly in the cerebellum, and a region tied to bodily self-awareness. Areas linked to a sudden surge of alertness at being self-exposed, not necessarily to calculating what anyone else might be thinking of you. Nobody's fully resolved what that means yet. Darwin's theory was that blushing gets triggered by imagining another person's judgment. Nikolic's data suggests the trigger might be something blunter and faster than that, a jolt of self-focused alertness that fires before any actual judgment gets calculated, whether or not another person is even watching. We know the reflex exists. We have a strong theory for why it might have evolved. We still don't fully know which switch in your brain is actually flipping it on. So the next time your face goes hot in front of someone and you feel that flash of wanting to disappear, remember what's actually happening. That's not a malfunction. That's not weakness. That's hundreds of thousands of years of social evolution, running a calculation you can't see, confessing something on your behalf, whether you wanted it to or not.